Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new series. I'm going to call it the Roguelike Deep Dive, something like that. I just wanted to provide a series for people to just get a good idea of some of the main aspects of a particular roguelike title in order to compare and contrast to all the different titles that are available in the genre. It's a growing genre, especially over the past few years. Games like Risk of Rain 2, Binding of Isaac, and Isaac Rebirth, Spelunky series, my own beloved Crab Champions that we're going to be talking about today, Super Auto Pet, Shatterline, dare I say it, Call of Duty Zombies. Listen, to some extent it is. Obviously, the exact definition of roguelike is kind of up for interpretation. People argue about it online all the time. I tried to do a little one-on-one, 101, informational type video on it if you want to go check it out, but to keep it super short, they typically consist of games where you start off with nothing and you build over time to have a build going with RNG loot, maybe even RNG level design. You get loot along the way. Hopefully you can get some build synergy going. You'll defeat a boss, you'll win, maybe you unlock some stuff, then you do it again. They're typically really hard punishing games. It's an interesting genre. It's a fun genre. There's even roguelites, and people love to argue roguelike versus roguelite. Typically have more permanent progression, like you will literally get like an extra 1% damage for the next run, and that's there forever. It's a permanent increase. Whereas roguelikes, you might unlock new classes or abilities or loot to add to the loot pool or weapons, whatever, but it's not really permanent stat buffs. Hades is a roguelite. Crab Champions is a roguelike. So what are those main aspects that I'm going to dive into? Well, let's start with what you do, who you are, things like that. So the weapons, the characters or classes, if there are any, the loot, the upgrades, how does that system work? Skills and abilities, does the game have those, and how do those work? And then on the other side of that coin, it's like, well, okay, cool, you got this build going, you got your cool skills and everything, but what are you attacking? What are the enemies like? How's the environment and level design? Is it RNG or is it preset templates? How's the soundtrack, the ambiance, and dare I say it, this is typically a bonus, but does it have an actual plot, an actual story to add to what you're doing? The cumulative effect of all of these different aspects will ultimately determine the replayability of a roguelike. Will you come back and play another run? Dive in. Are you enticed to check out a new build? Or are you going to go hit up a different roguelike that's been collecting dust in your Steam library? How replayable is it? So with all that out of the way, let's look into Crab Champions. Crab Champions is a third-person action roguelike. A lot of roguelikes tend to be 2D, either top-down or like platforming almost. This is a third-person shooter, just like Risk of Rain 2, and it's by the hit EDM artist Noisestorm. He made Crab Rave. Now he basically made the Crab Rave game, although you'll see it's a lot deeper than that. Many of you may actually not really know that this game exists. You might think it's an April Fool's Day joke. I mean, hey, the reveal trailer dropped on April Fool's Day 2018. The gameplay trailer, same thing, April Fool's 2019. Is it a joke? Was it a joke? Nobody knew. And for a while, all we were getting as the public was little tidbits, some teaser images, some GIFs or GIFs on Twitter and on Discord and the official server, but mostly nothing. And then finally, in January of 2023, this year, he dropped the closed beta. And then finally, again, April Fool's 2023, it is now in early access for $10, although it does go on sale from time to time. And over the last 7 months, the game has transformed tremendously and added legitimate, substantial things that have brought it up to the level of a lot of these other roguelikes that I'll be diving into in future videos. So, with all of that introduction out of the way, let's dive into those main aspects of the game that I was mentioning. Let's start off with the weapons. There are officially 16 starting weapons in the game right now, 2 of which are in the beta. You pick your starting weapon as part of your loadout and you go into your run. You do not find additional weapons, you do not swap weapons, you do not have a secondary weapon. You get your one starting weapon. We know that Noisestorm naturally has plans to continue adding them, and by the way, we only started off with, I think, 7, maybe 8 or 9 weapons at the beginning. They're all pretty unique, pretty variable, although we do want to start seeing some more goofy ones. It's a goofy game, let's be honest. It doesn't mean it's not legit or well thought out, but it is goofy. Another main thing in the beta right now that will obviously hit the game is melee weapons and abilities. So up until this point, you pick your starting weapon, and then you just have like a swipe melee, and there's mods and stuff that can affect that, but it's a basic claw melee. And then you have your grenade. Now, your grenade is one of your 5 ability options with more to come. Grapple hook, which is a fun one. etc. And your swiping claw melee is one of 3 melee options with more to come. It is also worth mentioning that not all of these weapons, abilities, and melee, or even loot, once we talk about that, is available from the start. You collect a currency called keys, and you spend those keys to unlock those items. And then with loot, it'll be added into the loot pool. You can find it in subsequent runs. With the weapons, obviously, you unlock them, and then you can use them from there on out. And obviously, there's skins and stuff based on challenges. And hopefully, we'll get even more customization in the future. From there, you just head into your run. And we'll talk about the way that the run and the level design and all that stuff works down the road once we get to those points. But that is that. Moving on to characters and classes. Nothing here with that. Not like you select a hermit crab for a certain stat loadout set versus a king crab or a snow crab. There's none of that yet. I say yet, but probably never, and that's fine. Moving on to skills and abilities. Obviously, I said the grenade, like those are abilities, but that's just a terminology. What I mean by this with skills and abilities is like the way that like Overwatch characters have skills and abilities, or Valorant, right? Where each character or class would have specific stuff. And we don't have that here because we don't have characters and classes. We do have inherent movement abilities though. There's a dash, which is a double jump. You can double jump forward, backward, left, right, and omnidirectional. And now sliding is officially omnidirectional with this beta as well. Originally, you can slide forward and back. Now we can slide forward, back, left, right, and then the diagonal. So using those things and getting that movement down is a big part and a big mechanic in the game. So you could call that a skill and ability to some extent, kind of a little asterisk there, but it is in the game. It's worth mentioning. Here's the big section, one of the largest sections, loot and upgrades. So the basic idea, the premise is you clear an island, you collect the loot. That's what you do. You start off with a basic weapon, basic melee, basic ability, and eventually you have weapon mods, ability mods, and perks that give you a build. And there's tons and tons of different synergies. The speed at which you get a good build, quote unquote good, it's pretty damn fast. And this can be seen as both a positive and a negative depending on who you ask in the roguelike community. Some people say the balancing is busted. It's way too easy to get a good build. And then some people think that the game is too hard. So it's a personal preference. I love that I can just get in there and it's not a huge time commitment to get a crazy good run, but that's just me. More into the specifics though, each island is separated by reward chests, right? Based on the portal choice. And what I mean by portal choice is when you complete an island, you are then presented with 2 options, and there's different island types, which we'll get into later, but then there's the loot type, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. There are various loot types, so let's go into them. Damage, just damage upgrades. These can be mods, perks, doesn't matter. It's stuff to do with your damage. Speed, rate of fire increases, melee cooldown reduction, ability cooldown reduction, stuff like that. Luck, various chance-based proccing items. A lot of the damage items are also chance-based, but some of them are specifically luck. Elemental, these are the elements: fire, ice, lightning, poison. Poison works like slag in Borderlands 2. And arcane, which works very similar to fire, where it's a damage over time. Economy, the crystals is a currency that you get during the game to spend in shops. Pretty straightforward. So economy, you'll increase the rate at which you gain crystals, or ways that you can gain crystals, or maybe shop prices are decreased, or more options of the shop. Skill, these are like melee range, or loot choices per chest, or mag size. Health, increase your base health, increase the rate at which you gain health back, health on kill, stuff like that. Critical chests, this is just crit chance or damage per crit, or maybe chance to do 3x on crits. Crit is obviously very important in these types of games, so those are very highly valuable. And finally, greed. These are the most powerful loot type, and these items have a strong positive but also a strong negative. So think of a game like Brotato, where a lot of items have that positive and negative. In Crab Champions, they only exist like that as greed perks, and you can only find them in greed chests. Loot is also 3 main types, like I said. There's weapon mods, there's ability mods, once the abilities hit the main build, and perks. Weapon mods affect your weapon, ability mods will affect your ability, and perks kind of affect your entire build as a whole. There's also hearts, which is health, armor, which is like that bonus health based on the amount of your max health, right? Then there's crystal bundles that you can pick up, and finally keys technically is a loot item that you find. Keys carry over, you unlock items, and then eventually there will be cosmetics you can unlock with keys. In theory, cross my fingers. Finally, I think the last loot source, maybe, totems. These are typically gambling or some sort of payment. Example, health totem. You have a 50% chance to double your max health, 50% chance to half it. Gamble totem, where you spend some crystals for a chance at a loot item. A lot of these different totems, a lot of them spawn in shop islands or throughout regular islands. So those are just another way to interact and get loot. And then we have a rarity system, obviously. It is a bit weird that we start at the rare blue level. There's nothing below blue. They're the most common, and it's all the uninteresting, mostly just like stat ups, like small things here and there. As you go further, you might find some of the more rare ones called epics. These are purple. And this is where you start to see things that proc, maybe additional projectiles, like firework, for example. There's a cooldown on hits, you'll spawn fireworks. It might be percent chance based. It's definitely percent chance based. What the hell? I'm supposed to be an expert on this game. Anyway, legendary, those are orange, most rare of normal items. And, these are just really, really strong, but very situational. So you gotta really make sure that they synergize well with your build. Sometimes legendaries can be shit if you don't have the right stuff around it. Other times, completely swing the tide of your run and make it a W. And finally, greed. These are technically the rarest. Again, there's a big positive, big negative. These will also, just like legendary, really swing a run in your favor if you get the right one. Or it can really hurt. They're greedy. All in all, there are well over 250 unique loot pickups. There is a ton of potential builds. Not like Binding of Isaac, it's not 800 items if you have the DLC, but it's a lot of and they're not all perfect. Most of them do feel unique and add variety. We're gonna move on to enemies. Look, we can talk about the weapons, the character classes, the loot. Oh my god, all this loot, but what if you don't have good enemies to fight, right? You need some good enemy varieties. And that's why this game has over 40 unique enemies across at least 7 types of enemies. We've got different types of skulls, different types of crabs, different types of pumpkins for some reason, different types of slugs, pufferfish, starfish, limpets, the list goes on. There's special evolved variants, different elemental variants. There's a lot going on. Most of them fit the tropical vibe, but obviously pumpkins, a little bit odd, skulls, a little bit odd, but nonetheless, the game has enemy variety. Ultimately, that diversity is what makes it fun to go back into more runs and try out new builds, because you're fighting all these different types of enemies, and some are just kind of cannon fodder. They come up and try to melee you, and they're real slow and they don't dodge, and then others have crazy charge up attacks or line attacks or different balls that might bounce around. Laser beams, there's laser skulls, and they charge up basically a sniper shot that can easily one-hit you. The variety is good, and it's only increasing. And I expect we'll see well over 50 to 100 enemies within the next year. Just really round it out. And it is worth mentioning that enemies are unique, or there's a unique enemy pool per biome, which flows right into the environmental and level design. This is a big one for roguelikes, right? Most of them actually even go with procedural generation, RNG a little bit. There's not that here. There's a pool of islands. They're pre-made, and they are our biomes, so different themes. So, pull it back here. Runs consist of a loop. You finish the loop on island 30 when you defeat the boss. Each subset of 10, though, is its own biome. And within a biome, there's 10 islands, right? First 8 are normal islands. Island 9 is going to be a shop no matter what, and Island 10 is elite. If it's the first or second biome, elites are like mini boss fights, right? Pretty straightforward. A lot of games and roguelikes have elites. So for those first 8, you can have an arena. You just clear multiple waves of increasingly harder opponents. On the other side, we have hordes. You can just hide. Survive until the counter hits 0. Spiked, this is basically just an arena, but the reward chest is always a spiked chest. Spiked chests are epic loot no matter what, but you sacrifice the equivalent of 33% of your health right then and there to open it. Waves is a brand new one with the beta, so that will be in the game. Fight through up to 6 waves currently of increasing difficulty, and the reward you get increases as you progress through those waves. The caveat here is that if you take damage at all, it ends immediately, and you get the reward chest that you're currently on. You get up to epic, and you start off with just health. Now, there's some modifiers that can be applied, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated, but I'll try my best. There's challenge modifiers that can appear on arena and spiked islands, and these add hazards or crazy things that happen when enemies die. For example, energy rings will explode when enemies die. A lot of fun, goofy shit. Then there's blessings that can be applied to hordes. Blessings are kind of the opposite of a challenge. A challenge is like, it is a modifier to that island. It's there no matter what. A blessing is like a bonus objective, and if you complete it, you'll get an extra chest. Right now, there's only one blessing in the game, but there are more that were being tested out. Probably might sneak their way into this update, if not the next one. But yeah, the flawless blessing is if you don't take damage, you get a second chest. So There could be other blessings, like if you only use melee for the island, you'll get an extra chest, or if you only use your ability, stuff like that. With the elites and boss fights that I was mentioning, again, Island 10 and 20 are going to be elites, Island 30 is going to be boss. Those drop keys in addition to chests, right? So when you beat an elite, you'll get a key chest, an epic chest, and a health chest. Health chest will give you health or armor. Key chest will give you some keys that you can remember, go and unlock stuff. Legendary chest, which is great. Oftentimes, Island 30 is your first legendary. That's how rare they are. You won't get them until the legendary chest. And then this is where it gets really fun and where it turns into more of a true roguelike. The game gives you an option after beating the boss on 30. If you want to loop it, you can go to another loop. No! And then you cannot win, and you will not get the same choice to win or loop until another 30 islands. So 60, then 90, 120, so on and so forth. And this is where the game gets crazy. Scaling for the enemies is substantial on looping. Every biome it does get harder. Hard to notice though, but after you loop, boom, much harder. But you got that legendary. You want to try it out, so you're going for it. You gotta loop 3 times. 3.5, really. You gotta get to 120. But anyway, I digress. It gets a lot harder, but you've got some good items. You might start stacking. You find duplicates and it levels up those items. Something I didn't really talk about. It turns into a true bullet hell, except the enemies are bullet hell, true, but you yourself are a bullet hell with the amount of projectiles and the amount of weapon mods and perks and ability mods that you have on your build. Tons and tons of fun. Now, the specific order of those islands 1 through 8 in each biome is predetermined, at least the type of island. Island 1 of the biome is always just a basic damage chest and a basic no challenge arena island. But Island 2 is always going to be a challenge. The order, presenting all of this information is actually tough in the right order because there's also run modifiers, and one of the run modifiers is random islands. So the choice and the order of the island types is random. So it's not always set in stone. But when it is set in stone, when you don't run that modifier, I believe Island 2 is a challenge island. And then Island 3 is a horde island. And Island 4 is an arena. And then Island 5 is a shop. So on and so forth. There's a specific order. But like I said, you get those portal choices. So even though there's RNG loot, and even though you don't know what you're getting, you get to choose the reward chest type, the loot category that you will receive upon completing the next island. You do have some control over your destiny, and you can actually go for a build that you've seen a creator like myself post, or you've seen your friend get. That's really cool. Let's get into those modifiers and really just difficulty selection in general, right? When you start a run, there's a difficulty totem. Everything's totems to interact. And you can determine easy, normal, nightmare, which is like hard, or ultra chaos once you unlock it. And these generally affect things like enemy health, enemy attack damage, your own starting health, enemy movement speed, number of enemies that spawn, things like that. But in addition, there are run modifiers. Think of Halo campaign with the Skulls modifiers. Same kind of thing. Different challenges are kind of permanently applied to the entirety of the run. Things like heals, just not doing as much healing as they used to. Or random islands, like I said. It's not a predetermined order from 1 through 8. You can actually potentially find a shop on Island 2 or even on Elite. As you add more modifiers, the overall challenge level of your run increases. And that factors into a ranking / medal system where if you do get the win, depending on the amount of challenge levels and modifiers, and if you start on easy, normal, nightmare, or ultra chaos, you will get a medal attached to the weapon. And if you do nightmare, all modifiers on, to Island 60, you will get Diamond, the highest rank, and if you do that on every single weapon, you unlock secret, extra hard difficulty of Ultra Chaos. And that's just a fun little way to track your progress as you complete runs on higher and higher difficulties by adding more run modifiers, or just going from easy to normal, or normal to nightmare, etc. Let's move into the final points that are, they're bonuses, but they're still very, very important. First, the soundtrack, the ambiance. We all knew Noisestorm was going to kill it. He made Crab Rave, and as much as that song is goofy, it is a good EDM song. It's happy, it's tropical, it makes you smile. And this game is full of songs that somehow all sound like Crab Rave 2. Whether it's the upbeat tropical biome soundtrack, or the vibey, chill Arctic biome soundtrack, or the intense, almost dubsteppy to some extent, lava soundtrack. It's just knocking it out of the park. Obviously, like I'm saying, there's a specific soundtrack pool for each biome, and he hopes to have a solid 15 to 20 completed songs for each biome. before moving on to creating new biomes. So we talk a lot about biomes. There will be more. Right now we've got tropical, which is like beachy, sand. We've got ice, or Arctic, which is ice and snow. And then we have lava, which is like fire and like dark volcanic rocks and just volcano type stuff. But we will eventually get other biomes entirely. Lots of ideas. I think he has like at least 15 that he wants to do. I could be pulling that number out of my ass. I'm sorry, Noidstorm. I'm not trying to put more pressure on you. I'm just saying. Anyway, back to the music. There's a surprising amount of depth here. All of the songs that I've been using in this video are work in progress soundtracks. I say work in progress because once they're truly finalized, he will release the soundtracks in volumes as they go on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, etc. So technically they're not finished yet, but they are good. They slap. It's one of the best soundtracks in any game that I've played, and I've played Rocket League. I haven't really seen any game match that until Crab Champions. I know a lot of the other roguelikes also are touted for having amazing soundtracks, and I'm really excited to dive into them. Risk of Rain, people love that one. I'd say Crab is better, but it's always going to be personal preference. And finally, plot, story. This is truly a bonus for the roguelike category, and unfortunately, Crab Champions has jack shit. There will eventually be some ideas to have like Tony the shopkeeper. That's the crab who runs the shop. He's kind of just a item. He's not an animated NPC, but he will be eventually. There's going to be some Easter eggs, maybe some secret islands, secret biomes, secret loot, things like that. And there will be lore that is flushed out naturally over time with hints in the game. It's going to be, Easter egg, that hint wave. Until then, we're kind of just a goofy crab shooting other crabs and sea creature-esque things. I'm confident that it'll happen eventually. It is definitely fair, call a spade, one of the weakest points of the game. Oh, and real quick, one last thing. There are technically a couple mini games, most roguelikes. There's the roguelike, there's the main thing, and that's it. As of the beta build, there are 2 side modes. There's arcade mode, which is get as many kills as possible in a specified amount of time. Currently, it's 90 seconds. Then the other side of that coin is how many infinite waves can you clear? These waves start off very easy, and they get very hard. Eventually, elites start spawning, and bosses. You cannot take damage ever. And, by the way, neither of these modes have actual loot or other stuff that would traditionally make them roguelikes. We also know for a fact that friendly PvP is coming eventually. The gameplay trailer originally said survivor mode, PvP mode, and racing mode. Well, racing mode has come in as parkour islands, which I didn't talk about. Holy shit, parkour islands are like a version of racing mode. You just get from point A to point B, try not to fall off, try to get there in a certain amount of time. If you get there under a certain amount of time, you get an epic chest. If you don't, you get a rare chest. If you don't complete the course at all, you get a health chest. But yeah, so racing mode turned into parkour islands. Survival mode is just the main mode. And then PvP, everyone thought like, whoa, crab of duty coming in. No. But I did play an experimental build a little while ago. He is still planning on bringing it to the game eventually. And you're just, hey, you got some friends, load into a little arena, basic weapons, just shoot each other, just fuck around. It's like 1v1ing your friends on Rust. One other thing that I know is coming is the little coconut, like skeet shooting, target practice. Little target practice mini game. He showed that off really long time ago as like a quick promotional little teaser, and since then it's been nothing, but he promises me it's gonna happen eventually and hopefully soon. And now that I said it out loud, Noidstorm, I know you might, maybe you watch this and putting pressure on you, Buster. Get it done. So I've been rambling. I hope that I at least categorize these things in digestible chunks for what are the main things, the main aspects of a roguelike in my opinion. This all comes down to an experience that I believe to be deeply replayable and deeply enjoyable. I'm a little biased. I understand that. At this point, this channel is a Crab Champions channel. Take it with a grain of salt. I don't think this is just a stupid meme game. I don't think this is just a goofy game. I think it's well worth checking out, especially at the price tag of $10. It's very affordable and it is very fun. And even if you only get a few hours out of it, it's a good few hours. And the fact that each major update has introduced substantial features over time means that it will only get better and more consistent with some other roguelikes that might have some more depth in certain areas. I've got over 300 hours in the game. It's not just because I think it's going to be the next big game, because trust me, if I was trying to be rich off content creation, picking a small indie game is not the right strategy. Genuinely enjoy making content for this game. I think it's a fun game, and I think that, again, it's worth checking out. It's a rewarding gameplay loop that has me coming back, trying out new builds, new weapons when they're introduced, new enemies to fight, new soundtrack, new island layouts, all this new stuff consistently over time. So that is that. The Roguelike Deep Dive for Crab Champions. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Hopefully this gives you a better understanding of the game Crab Champions. It's not just a meme, it's a legit roguelike. And based on the different aspects I talked about, the enemies, the weapons, the loot, etc., you can make decisions on if you think it's a fun time or if you want to go back to playing Risk of Rain or Binding of Isaac like most people. But hey, I will be diving into other games as well, and then we can start really comparing and contrasting, maybe some tier lists eventually. The next one on the docket is Brotato, because I already had it. I've already sunk hours into it. I already feel like I can talk about that game a lot, and I definitely have some interesting things to say, and it is very interesting to see how Brotato stacks up towards something like Crab Champions. So if you like the video, it does help me out. YouTube algorithm, you know the deal. Please subscribe to the channel if this series is interesting, and just in general, if Crab Champions is interesting. I have tons of fun builds where I just go crazy, and some fun gameplay with the boys, build guides, covering the dev updates as they come out, and just anything about Crab Champions. I'm your guy, so please consider subscribing, and hopefully catch you in the next one. See ya.